Hi, I'm Angus Crescalespi, your host for Old Ways in New Jersey, here on East Brunswick Television. I'm here today with Jim Albertson of Millville, New Jersey, who's often been called South Jersey's best storyteller. Jim's stories tell of an earlier and simpler New Jersey through the old-fashioned media of stories and songs. He tells of the lower area of our state, a virtual peninsula sandwiched between the Delaware River and the Atlantic Ocean. It's rural and isolated. It looks more to Philadelphia than to New York. It's a place known for pine forests and salt marshes, a place that some say time has forgotten, a place with lonely sand-track roads and vast cranberry bogs. It was settled by Tuscarora Indians, runaway slaves, Hessian deserters, smugglers, criminals, outlaws, and those who just wanted to get away from it all. Some say that South Jersey will forever be haunted by a strange creature known as the Jersey Devil. Given this history, it's not surprising that South Jersey has produced a master storyteller. He's the past president of the New Jersey Folklore Society and a recipient of the New Jersey Folk Festival's Award for Distinguished Contributions to the Folk Music of New Jersey. He's a Folkways recording artist whose work is still kept in print by the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. His name is Jim Albertson, and it's my pleasure to welcome him to our studio here today. Jim, can you tell us a little bit about growing up in Atlantic City before they had casinos?
Well, Atlantic City, even though it was in economic decline at the times, it was a wonderful place to grow up. We practically lived on the beach, first of all. And in fact, when I was a teenager, I was an actual beach boy, setting up beach chairs and umbrellas for people. One of our steady customers was the wife of Nucky Johnson, the political boss of Atlantic City, who's now being characterized in the HBO series Boardwalk Empire. So I knew Mrs. Johnson very well and oftentimes set up her beach chair for her. The Steel Pier was an absolutely wonderful place to go. It was sort of the Disneyland of its day, movies and stage shows, magic.
Maybe it was the Steel Pier that got you interested in show business.
I think it was. In fact, I worked on the Steel Pier as an usher for many years. My uncle was the head of the movie projectionist union, and our whole family really was involved in some way with the Steel Pier. And being there and being backstage a lot of times, I was able to meet a lot of the celebrities. And one person who really took me under his wing and taught me a lot about voicing and about character and acting techniques, actually, before I went to school to study theater, was Frank Fontaine, who was on the Jackie Gleason show, and he was famous for the character John L.C. Savoni was the original name. He'd go, "Hey, Joe. Hello, Mr. Donahue." And then he would sing these beautiful songs in this beautiful, deep, rich baritone voice. And he was a big influence on me and the whole Steel Pier.
Did you see the horse jump into the...
Many times. I knew the horses, sure, and one of them especially, my favorite, was Dima.
They go on this big high platform and dive into a bucket of water?
And, well, it was almost a bucket of water. It was a pool. Some people probably have backyard pools bigger than the tank that the horse jumped in. But one of the horses was named Dima, and it was an especially friendly horse. And if Dima was Hamid, spelled backwards, George Hamid was the owner of the Steel Pier. So they just spelled his name backwards. And that was the big thrill for everybody to see. They tried years ago, after the Steel Pier burnt down, to have a diving donkey. It wasn't the same.
Now, your work, Jim, it's strongly identified with South Jersey. Perhaps you can share with us just a bit. What's distinctive about that region?
Well, South Jersey is extremely rural area, except for the shore itself. The shore would be more comparable to places up in North Jersey, closer to New York. Very crowded, extremely expensive living, traffic jams, especially in the summer. Right now, however, as we speak, it's fall, and there are pictures in the local newspapers in South Jersey of the local people who enjoy the beach more at this time of year. They can take their dogs down, they can run. A lot of people sit on the beach all winter long. And as soon as the traffic clears out and the tourists go home, the beach is open for the local people.
So you're suggesting that there's more to South Jersey than just the Pine Barrens?
Oh, yeah, yeah. And there's more to the shore than just some of the characters that you see on the famous television program.
I recall back in the 80s, there was a movement for South Jersey statehood. How do you feel about that? I guess that's no longer being cooked up.
Well, Herbert Halpert had a joke, story, anecdote that he collected in his massive collection of New Jersey and Pine Barrens material, where a local politician in South Jersey wanted to put a barbed wire fence around South Jersey. And he contacted a hardware store, and the hardware store owner said, "We have just enough barbed wire to do the job if you order early." But, however, a lot of southern New Jersey is below the Mason-Dixon line, and many of the communities and a lot of the people, I'd say a good majority of the people in southern New Jersey sympathized with the Confederacy during the Civil War.
Now, after high school, I understand you went to Montclair State College.
Right.
Were you able to polish your music and your storytelling in that program?
No, quite the opposite, as a matter of fact, and especially traditional storytelling. Dr. Kenneth Goldstein, the head of the folklore department, a person you knew well, at the University of Pennsylvania, head of the folklore department, he always told about the best storytellers that he ever ran into were people who were very conversational and relaxed. And before you knew it, and realized that you were listening to a story and then you were caught up with it. And many people who even teach storytelling today say, oh, keep the dramatics off, cut the characters, suggest these animals rather than running around and flapping your arms and making outrageously loud noises. Suggest it to the audience, because the key in storytelling, there's what is called the storytelling trance, where the story listeners are sort of wrapped up in painting their own picture in their head of what the storyteller is suggesting. So my theater training, what I had to do when I started telling stories full-time, I had to take a lot of that polish off, since I wanted to tell traditionally, as Ken Goldstein suggested.
You had to unlearn what you learned.
I had to unlearn what I learned, exactly, yeah.
Were you in any way caught up with the folk revival of the 1960s?
Oh, yes. In fact, there was a direct connection to that with my studies at Montclair. I was on the stage crew and lighting and sound crew, and many times a lot of the touring groups that came through, they not only performed at Montclair's theater, but they needed extra help when they toured the universities and different sites in northern New Jersey. And our stage crew would sometimes travel around for a couple days with these acts, with what is sometimes referred to as the Great Folk Scare of the 60s. So I was involved with people like Peter, Paul, and Mary and the Kingston Trio in the background, helping to set up and got a taste for it. Then the thing that turned me really toward traditional music was a statement that Pete Seeger made on one of his albums. He said, "It's fine if you enjoy my work and my songs, but you really should go back further and explore the people that I listen to and the people that they listen to." And it was at that point when it became pre-television, pre-mass media, where people spread these stories by word of mouth. And as they went around through communities and families, they changed. They became refined into maybe 7 or 8 different roots of the original story.
And following up with the folk revival, were you ever involved with the Mine Street Coffee House in New Brunswick?
Oh, yes. Absolutely one of the craziest setups. It was a little tiny basement. I have bumps on my head from the many times I've cracked my skull.
It was in a church basement.
It was a church basement.
Right there on Mine Street.
Oh,
in
there
New
was
Brunswick.
dirt floors, there was coal bins, and I cracked my skull many times on the pipe right over the stage, just standing up, and it was not a sound effect, believe me.
And you weren't paid, you just passed the hat, really.
They passed the hat, but I'm proud to say, I guess, over the years, I was the highest earner. I filled the pumpkin better than anybody else. So that's, I don't have a plaque at home or a trophy or anything, but I should get a hold of that pumpkin.
And perhaps share with us a little bit about your relationship with the New Jersey Folk Festival over the years.
Well, actually, isn't it funny that the original student director, Kathy D'Angelo, is back and is running the festival again? But it was basically you and I and a group of students, and I remember some of those cold setup times, or the time we had just put lines on the field for the crafters, and then a terrible rainstorm would hit and wash it all away, or the windstorm where a crafter lost their entire ceramics display, and she was inconsolable. She just sat on the ground and cried for the next 8 hours. A horrible thing. And good times too, a lot of good times, and a good T-shirts over the years.
There were good times back when we were selling the beer. And very profitable too.
Yeah.
Tell me, how did you get hooked up with Folkways Records? Because obviously that's a proud accomplishment to be a Folkways recording artist.
Well, it is, and one of my dreams after I had graduated from college, I had actually four things that I wanted to achieve success in my mind. I wanted one of those old papier-mâché jack-o'-lanterns like they used to sell in the 5 and 10s. I wanted a General Electric tabletop circus, which was given out by General Electric dealers in the 50s to assemble. I wanted a 1956 Thunderbird. I'm still working on that one. The other two are in hand. And I wanted to make a Folkways recording. I thought I never would. I ran into Ola Belle Reed, who was at the festival, and she and her son...
Sort of a hillbilly singer, you might
well,
say.
I wouldn't say hillbilly. I would say old-time music, and I would say bluegrass. And some of her compositions are classics in the field today. One high on a mountain, wind blowing free, thinking about the days that used to be. High on a mountain, standing all alone, wondering where the years of my life have flown. So many bluegrass bands have recorded that. And we became good friends.
She sold records, too.
She was on Folkways. She was on several different labels, and she called Moses Ash, who was the founder of Folkways. She said, there's a friend of mine in New Jersey. He has some wonderful material. And I actually recorded at her home in Rising Sun, Maryland. Her son had a recording studio, and the walls were lined with egg cartons. That was the sound absorbing material. And he was looking for a name one time for the studio in his business. And I looked at the wall, and one of the labels said, Strictly Fresh. So I said, how about Strictly Fresh Sound Studios? And that's what he used. Moses Ash bid on the deal, and we recorded. And unfortunately, it was the last Folkways album that Moses Ash produced.
Wow, that's kind of poignant. And I understand your material's still available in print from Smithsonian.
Well, one of the wonderful things about being on Smithsonian Folkways, as long as there's a Smithsonian, they will never go out of print, however the media may change.
And very few recording artists can say that.
Very few companies can say that. That's why I think they turned it over to the Smithsonian. It was the only company that could fulfill his dream of keeping everything in print.
And Jim, what's the nature of your continuing involvement with Wheaton Village? Because a lot of our viewers are not familiar with Wheaton Village.
Well, Wheaton Village is now called Wheaton Arts, and it started out as a glass town recreation, a factory and glass art primarily. Now, We also have what is known as the Down Jersey Folklife Center. It's one of several folklife centers throughout the state of New Jersey.
It's kind of a component of Wheaton Village.
It's one of the components, yeah. You can literally spend the day there and have a good time. And the Museum of American Glass is there. And right now, we are probably the most active of the folklife centers in New Jersey. We have programming all the time. We have exhibits all the time. And our director, who is Dr. Iveta Pirgova, she's from Bulgaria, has this great knack for creating these beautiful, beautiful visual displays. That's one of her real strong points.
And tell us a little bit about your work with your radio show, Down Jersey.
Well, as a matter of fact, next month will be my 45th year involved in radio. I started on the Steel Pier in Atlantic City with a station right on the second floor of the pier. And I'm currently with a station in Vineland, New Jersey, which covers most of southern New Jersey. And it's in Philadelphia, Wilmington, Delaware, and eastern Maryland as well. And if anyone is interested in hearing the program, it's on Thursday evenings at 9, and the best way to find out more about it is just go online, WVLT, VL meaning Vineland, and T was the initial of the original owner, whose name I can't remember, WVLT.com, look for the schedule, and there it is, and it's streamed live on the internet.
So we could get it up here in Central Jersey.
Oh, yeah.
Jim, as a storyteller, do you see yourself as an educator or as an entertainer?
Well, a little bit of both. In fact, to do work for schools, which was my main business for
many years.
Ages, for most of my career, material, you had to tell the committee or the principal or whoever, yes, the show is entertaining and educational. You can't just come in and sing a bunch of songs, and it has to have some kind of focus. So, sure.
And connected to that, do you feel a kind of an obligation to pass along this traditional material of South Jersey to the next generation?
I do, and I'm happy to say that from time to time I run into people down in the area who will say to me, my 13-year-old son doesn't miss your show and always calls me to remind me to turn it on 5 minutes before 9 on Thursday night. And I think about that, I go, wow, a 13-year-old who should be, supposedly they're supposed to be playing
video games
and moving their thumbs like this, and here's somebody listening to traditional music on radio. Some people don't know what a radio is even these days. I was telling some of the guys earlier, I'm one of the few people that can sight cue a record. Everybody's using the laptops now.
And along the same lines, do you think storytelling should instill moral and ethical values?
Well, most good stories do automatically, but not necessarily. There are some stories that are just for plain old fun. They're extended jokes, many of them, and they're great too.
In your experience, and this is sort of a tough question, what's more important, plot or character?
Plot, I would say, because again, the traditional storyteller de-emphasizes characterization. You're suggesting it more. I'll give you an example.
All right.
Okay. You're telling about a witch. You know? So the witch had green skin, scaly skin, and a long pointed nose with a wart on the end. Or you could say, the witch had green, scaly skin and a nose with a wart on the end. Well, that's acting. That's actually being the character. To suggest that the witch had green, scaly skin and she had a long, pointed nose with a wart on the end, and growing out of the wart was a 3-foot-long hair with a hoot owl perched on the end. That's how the storyteller would do it.
So you're allowing the listener to use his or her imagination.
Yeah, they're not, some of them may be seeing Margaret Hamilton. Some of them may be seeing a politician from Delaware. Some of them may be seeing their own witch.
So
they're making it up.
So you have to tone down gesture and tone of voice.
Right.
It's not acting.
So. I believe so, yeah.
And we've touched on this before, but maybe just a little bit. How do you adapt the material for different audiences? Children, adults?
Sometimes I don't. I want to make that clear. Sometimes I don't insult the children by talking down to them.
Okay.
Sometimes I tell the same story for a children's audience during the day, and maybe at a senior citizens center at night, the same exact story in exactly the same way. And both groups hopefully enjoy it as much. But the adaptation for the children is more of maybe sprinkling a little bit more of the spice of character in it, but again, never crossing that line into acting and being the character.
And yet at the same time, you must be conscious of painting a picture with sound and smell and the sense organs and sight.
Yeah, again, the traditional storyteller vs. the theatrical storyteller would say, "Ah!" And the traditional storyteller would say, the witch let out with a blood-curdling, horrendous scream that could be heard for 15 miles away, like a motorsports park.
Because when you start acting, it breaks the trance.
Yeah.
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 And I don't know exactly how to ask this. Do you memorize the stories? And if you memorize them, how do you do it?
Absolutely not. That really puts you into, well, in a way, the people that tell literary stories, they are really obligated to tell the story word for word.
Like
as
Mark Twain.
Telling a Mark Twain story, an Edgar Allan Poe story, yeah, you really shouldn't change that. But a traditional story, I sort of have the outline, the bare bones outline in my mind. I'm not really sure I've ever told the same story twice in the same way.
Are you conscious of making changes?
Sometimes not. No, sometimes something will happen in the room that will spark me to say something different in the story. So again, traditional telling takes a lot of that theatrical polish off. It's more conversational in nature.
And as a folklorist, I have to ask, do you have material in your repertoire that follows the rule of three? Three brothers, three fables, three treasures, three riddles.
Actually, you remind me of one of the lines in one of the stories that I do where the genie appears and
Three wishes?
says no, the genie says you get one wish.
Oh dear.
And the person says, well, wait a minute. In the other stories, they get three wishes. How come I'm only getting one? Well, you've been extra bad. You're only getting one wish.
And in some of your stories, is it fair to say the hero might be a person of little importance, not rich?
Oh, yeah, sure. In fact, that's the whole basis of many of the Jack tales. The trickster hero. Brer Rabbit is a trickster hero who is not able to defend himself physically, maybe, but outsmarts the giant or the wizard or the opponent.
And do you have what would commonly be called fairy tales in your repertoire?
Not too many. I do some of what are called fractured fairy tales, or the best example would be "Once upon a time there was a gritty little pearl named Prinderella who lived with her two sugliesters and her stick-it wet mother. They made her pine all the shots and shans and do all the other wordy dirk around the house."
I don't know, is that called a Wellerism? I'm not quite sure.
Spoonerism.
Spoonerism, okay. Yeah. And how about legends in your repertoire?
Well, no, there's many legends in the South Jersey repertoire, especially. Mentioned Sammy Giberson earlier, who was a real person. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe a folklorist defines a legend as a cycle of tales about a person who really was living at one time.
Or is believed to be.
Or is believed to be. The legends of Davy Crockett and so forth. Yeah, there's quite a few in my repertoire.
And what about ghost stories?
Oh, and I might mention that the Jersey Devil stories are under the category of legends of the Jersey Devil, because children always ask me, is the Jersey Devil real? And historically, yes, there was a real person who was said to be the origin of the Jersey Devil. Yeah.
What about ghost stories?
You know what? It's funny. I'm not really fond of ghost stories.
But Molly Bannon, isn't that a ghost story?
Well, there's a ghost mentioned in it. Yeah, but it's not a real ghost story. People are going to be surprised to hear this. Most ghost stories that I've heard or read bore me to death. They're really not, I don't think they're good stories. Well, it was dark, there was a strange noise, I saw a light, it might have been the old man that lived in the house at one time. I'm bored by that.
Yeah. What about UFO stories?
The same category. No. This is the age of enlightenment. Show me the proof, show me the proof.
Have you been to the National Storytelling Festival down there in Jonesboro,
Oh, yes, several
Tennessee?
times.
What's that like?
That's a great thing to do. It takes place throughout the town of Jonesboro, which is a nice community in itself, just to visit when the storytelling isn't going on. Beautiful little town. They have a huge tent set up. They have smaller tents throughout the town. There's buildings where it just goes on, and it goes late into the night, too. And some of the best stories, some of the best New Jersey stories that I've ever heard were collected by Kendall Morse, who was a lighthouse keeper in Maine. And he's got all these stories about New Jersey tourists going up to Maine. And he went on for almost 3 hours one night with New Jersey tourist stories of people coming to Maine.
Jim, an old storyteller once told me, he said, in telling stories, he said, sincerity is everything. If you can fake that, you got it made.
That's great. Great line.
How do you feel about that?
Can I use it?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. What about pacing? Would you speed things up, slow things down?
Oh, yeah. Pacing doesn't come under that category of over-theatricalizing something that I mentioned earlier. No, pacing is important. In fact, the best way to get people to jump out of their seats is not necessarily a loud, blood-curdling scream. It's a long space, and then the cat knocks the lamp over, or then something happens. The jump tails all have that pattern, and it's very important to leave that space and then the boo.
And I guess, finally, how do you feel about costumes and props?
Absolutely not. I don't use them at all. This hat is a prop. It's just to keep people from knowing what I really look like. No, again, I feel that's there. Now, again, I try to tell stories traditionally.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that someone can't do that style well.
But it's just not for you.
That's just not for me. No.
Well, Jim, I want to thank you for sharing your storytelling experiences with our East Brunswick television audience, and it's been a real pleasure.
And I'm going to be back here on the 20th and 21st of November, so come on down.
Okay.